So you see that the workflow is exactly the same. So we have instructions, given reviews, received reviews, reflections, and grading module. The difference, main one that we have here, is that on the very top of the assignment from the teacher side, you have what we call the students analytics dashboard. And you see that right here, if you don't expand, we just have few analytics, but if you expand, you can see everything per group and per individual. So you see who read the instructions, who finished the self-assessment, how much feedback was given, how many comments were written. So everything is here. You can click on the magnifying lens here to find the specific students. If your class is particularly large, you can move to full screen so you don't have to scroll through everything horizontally. So that's also good to know. And if these weren't enough, you can also export the analytics into an Excel spreadsheet and have a summary of everything that went on in the activity, comments and ratings included. So also for the rest of the steps, this is more general analytics. But as we will see, with the exception of the instructions, all steps have extensive analytics attached to them, and the Excel summarizes them all. So you see that right here in the given review steps, this seems like a lot. So I have class, let's say, overview, in which I can see the review average rating, the self-assessment rating, the average comments. I also have the equivalent per group, but also I can expand it and see it per individual. And also we have, you see all these words listed right here at the very top. This is a new feature that we have just released that is called the Keywords Inside feature. And basically, this gives us as a teacher an overview of all those recurring words that are coming up in a group member evaluation activity. So for example, if I click here on work, I will see all the students that mentioned work. So you see my various students. This is just to give the teacher even more information about what was going on in the activity, but can be ignored and can also be disabled if you don't want to have something like that, if you think it's somewhat distracting. But I want to show you the main interface, because this is just an overview, but we can have even more insightful analytics if we click on View All. So what you see right here is a heat map that shows us a wider picture of the rubric that we saw before. So on the left side, once again, I have my criteria. Here I have all the different levels of the rubric with the points. And I can see that I have some visualization. So you see gray, you see white, you see blue, based on how popular a rating was for that specific criteria. So you see that the darker the blue, the more popular the grade was. And if nobody picked that, it's going to appear whether white or gray. But you can also take a look at the insights, and that is what we were seeing before. Mentioning contributions, we can see which words were mentioned the most. But even if you're not satisfied with the color visualization, I personally think the best thing to look at is the total points. So this displays out of the 15 points that could have been allocated for this answer, 10 were given, so that we see that overall my class in terms of contributions is doing pretty well. Problem solving, they're doing excellently. But let's say that if we see that one aspect, one criteria is 20%, then it's something that I can myself as a teacher intervene and go into the assignment, and not go into the assignment, but go to class and say, oh, everybody is doing bad time management wise, let's talk about it. So this once again gives us more insights into how the activity is going for the students. And this is a class overview once again, but if you click here, now we see up next, it will open up a list of everybody in the class. And this way I can check the given reviews for each single student. I can check it for a group. And here I see just for the group number 106, but even more useful, I would say, I can check it per single student. So in this case, I would see Febronia's self-assessment and all the reviews that she's given and the various reviews recipients. So I can myself comment on their comments, and you see that as a teacher, I can see both the student names as well as the pseudonyms that appear to the students. So teacher is not affected by anonymity, but can figure out if somebody flags something to the teacher who who did what in a way. And I can, of course, reply to all the comments and delete the comments if I have the desire to do so. So this allows me full control over the activity. I can do the same going to the received reviews and reviewer ratings. Reviewer ratings refer to the fact that I enabled the feature that allowed my students to rate the feedback that they have received at the end of it, and that I can give a grade from 1 to 10 based on the quality of the feedback that they have received. So if you enable it, you'll also be able to see that. As for the reflections is not really interactive. You can see who wrote the reflection, who didn't, and then I can read the reflection of the people who did indeed write the reflection. So here I can see what these students learned, but it's more of a FYI. You cannot really interact with the reflection. It's more for you to know. And lastly, we have the group contribution grading. This, I would say, is a fairly complicated concept, so I will share with you some material so that I don't bombard you with too much information now, because I recognize that this is a lot. But this is the feature that I was mentioning before that allows you to automatically individualize the group presentation, let's say presentation grade, based on the students' rating, the ratings that the students have received on average. So if I decide to enable this feature, the platform, let's see a student who actually has completed the activity, the platform is going to pull the scores the students have accumulated for all the different criteria, compare it to the average of all the scores that were given by the other students, and then give this ratio, so this number that is from 0 to 2, and based on this score, the platform is going to provide a grade adjustment to the group presentation grade. So for example, I will try to make it as simple as possible. Outside of class, group 6 has given a presentation on topic X. They got 80% for this presentation. So I, as a teacher, I will manually go in and write 80% for this presentation. I see here that this student, for group contribution factor, they have accumulated 0.591%, which is very low, because 1 would mean that their grades is equivalent to the group average. So they pretty much did what everyone else has done. So if it was close to 1, this would mean that their grade stays 80%. While if it's significantly lower than 1, it means they performed much less well than the rest of their peers, which means they were free riding, which means that I myself would like to get rid of some points because they won't deserve 80% in that specific case. So I see that the platform, based on this calculation that it has made, suggests an adjustment in points to subtract to the total of 80% was the grade that they have received outside of Fiber Fruits. And I can decide to push it and produce an overall grade that in this case is going to be 51%. But if I think this is too harsh of a grade adjustment, which I think it is, I can even manually adjust it myself and make sure that the grade reflects what the student performance was. I know this sounds a little bit complicated also because I don't have the mathematical knowledge to explain it with the exact terms and the exact formulas that are behind this, but this is very well explained both in the edit mode of the assignment as well as in articles that we have written about it. But this, I think, it's a very, very useful feature because basically allows students to get a final grade that is not the presentation grade, but it's the actual individualized grade. Is this kind of clear? Doesn't have to be 100% clear now, but I wanted you to know that this is something that is available and possible, and then you can make the activity much simpler, keep it formative, keep it just graded upon completion or on student scores, and then students get a regular grade that it's unrelated to the group presentation grade. This is the ultimate use case that allows for the proper fair evaluation and grade individualization, but it's not mandatory to enable it. Okay, I will provide you with all the information on this one as well, but I wanted us to take a quick look at the edit mode of the assignment very, very quickly. So we still have the time to take a look at the assignment review as well. But basically, as far as instructions are concerned, you can edit it. We edit the rich text as you want. You can add items. The ones that we have seen for the comments are also available to the instructions. And here you can see that we have different collaboration options. I will also send you some resources on the collaboration options, because based on the combination of how students work and how students review, you can have different use cases. The main one, the one that I showed you, is students work individually and review within their groups. So they are giving feedback to each other as components of the same group. So once I have determined the collaboration option, I can select the groups that are gonna participate in this activity. Everything that all the groups that you have in Canvas are automatically synchronized. So all the groups that you have in a course will display here. What you can do here is select and unselect different groups based on which ones would like to participate in the activity. So once you're satisfied, you can click on done and all the groups will participate in the activity. In the given review steps, this is the one that has the most options that you will see. So here, the very first one I would say is the most important, and this is where you determine the feedback criteria that your students are gonna be giving feedback to each other upon. So I'm gonna click here on configure, and I see that here I have these three options to for students to give feedback. We have the rubric, quantitative and qualitative feedback. We have the scale rating, only quantitative feedback, and we have the comment criterion, only qualitative feedback. I want to show you the rubric to show you how extensive and how much you can edit this. But as you can see, everything that you see here, you can change. This is the rubric that I have set up, but we can set up one together as a template and edit it as much as we'd like. And it's also very nice to know that once you have created the rubric for the first time, you don't need to do it again, because this takes quite some time. And you can just reuse it, send it to a teacher, template it. So this becomes easier in the future. And I invite you to also try out to see all the various options that you have right here. The second thing that we can do about the given reviews is determine how many peers students are required to review. In this case, since you have to review your peers in a group, we advise to pick the option all. So every member of the group will be reviewed by all members of the group. Otherwise, it's an individual activity. For example, a regular peer review, you just select the number of reviews that you would like students to give and to receive. This is where you enable the self-assessment. This outlier detection is another feature that I won't go into detail to explain you, but I will provide you the resources. And this is something that allows you to individuate some group dynamics that might be happening. So allows you to detect conflict, allows you to understand if students are being underconfident and overconfident, and gives a label to the student name in the received review step, so that you can see if a student falls under a certain level label, but this is not visible to the student. So once again, is one more indication to the teacher of the class performance and the individual performance. New user interface design, this is something that is enabled by default. Here we have the scheduling the deadline, so you can determine when this task closes and select the date. And if you determine a date, this date will synchronize with the Canvas calendar and will appear into the students' to-do list. So you don't have to do it in Canvas, you can do it directly in Flipperfruits. This is where you determine the allocation. This is where you determine the anonymity. And visibility is where you determine when students will see the feedback they have received, which is what I was mentioning earlier. So here you can decide if students will have access to the feedback they have received after the review deadline, after a certain date that does not coincide with the review deadline, or manually, which is what I was mentioning about the business schools that sometimes don't want to release the feedback and just want the tool to be something for the students to communicate to the teacher, but not to communicate to each other. And when it comes to guiding students, here you have different options to allow students to give better feedback. So we have this feedback tips for reviewing, which is a series of tips that you write down. We have default ones, but you can also write your own and will appear randomly to the students while they're giving feedback. We have the review checklist is a checklist that appears at the end of the rubric, and students have to say, yes, no, I did this, I've been giving constructive feedback, I'll be reviewing everyone just to check if they did everything. And the automated feedback coach is that AI feature that I showed you a few minutes ago. Then we have the received reviews and reviewer ratings. There is not much to determine here. You can schedule a deadline after which students won't have access anymore to the feedback they have received, so they cannot read it anymore. And here is where you determine if students also give feedback to the feedback they have received, so they can also give a grade to their reviewer, but this won't reflect in the final grade for the activity. It's just for the reviewer to know how well the feedback was written. Reflections, you can determine how many words this has to be, schedule a deadline, and provide an additional instruction step to this one step. And then we have our grading module, lastly. So in case you enable the group contribution grading feature, the grades are going to be calculated solely on the ratings that students have received, because you need the average ratings to calculate the individualized grade. But in case you don't want that to be enabled, you will have all these different options. So you can mix and match these different grading points to create your own customized activity. So let's say I want to give a grade to my students based on their completion of the activity, then I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna give some points for completing, giving the feedback, some points for giving a minimum number of comments, points for reading all the received feedback, and points for writing the reflection. So here students are gaining points if they complete each step. So if they don't, they will have less. If they do all of them, regardless of the ratings they receive, they will get the full grade. If I want my students to instead being graded also on the ratings that they have received, then you can see that if I enable this one, this will change, and it will take everything that is in the rubric and in the scale rating, and you can determine the points for each single criteria. So if you think that a criterion is more important than another one, you can decide that students get more points for getting a higher score on this specific criterion. You see that now the percentage, this is more than 100. This is more of an indication than anything. This, I think we touched upon this last time. It's better if it amounts to 100, just to make the calculations also for yourself easier. But even if you leave it like this, then the grade is gonna be translated to the grading book. Having it amounted to 100 just makes the calculation easier. As smoother, you make sure that there is not half grade or something like that. So that's more simple. And as we discussed last time, these out of 100 grades does not necessarily reflect in what the students are going to see in the grade book. So if you want students to get maximum 10 points and they get 90%, they will see 9 out of 10 in their grade book, not 90%. 90% is what they see within the activity.